Gentlemen, Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
I thank my colleague from Texas. Representative Scott, you suggested earlier that students are suffering from the rising costs. In what universe will this do anything to lower the cost of education?
It will improve access because they will be able to pay. Well, they're in the mess because we haven't kept up with access. Like I said, when
But how does it lower the cost of tuition? How does it lower the cost of education?
It doesn't lower the cost of education.
It just forgives a loan.
That's right. Because
Right, which doesn't lower the cost of education.
And you want to note why the cost to the student is so much. When in the 1970s, the Pell Grant covered 80% of the cost of going to college. Now it's less than a third, and people are still trying to go to college.
Well, stated differently, why is tuition so much higher today than it used to be? On a relative basis to all other goods and services, the cost of education has gone up exponentially relative to the cost of all other goods and services with the exception of healthcare. Why is that?
I don't know why, but it is. And you're telling students...
But there are economic principles at stake. Why is the cost of education exponentially higher today than virtually every other good and service except for healthcare?
Well, you're going to have to ask the college administrators why the cost of college is so high, but the problem that students have is they got to pay it.
Chairwoman Fox, do you have an answer to why you believe the cost of education is so much higher, exponentially higher than all other goods and services?
Well, I think it's because the federal government subsidizes education. Let me give you an example. The more federal aid and generous loan subsidies that we give out, the higher go the prices of tuition. For example, for every $1 increase in student loan subsidies, colleges increase their tuition 60 cents. So we know that the more money you put out there, the more the colleges and universities are going to charge. Increased availability of graduate loans led institutions to increase their cost of attendance dollar for dollar, with no evidence that such loans led to increases in accessibility and enrollment of disadvantaged students. Colleges reduced their own grant aid by as much as 83 cents for every dollar students receive in taxpayer student aid.
Let me ask you another question, Chairwoman Fox. I heard earlier that this is similar to a PPP loan. Now, I take issue with that characterization because whatever one thinks of the CARES Act, I have massive problems with the CARES Act and its $2 trillion of inflation causing spending and paying people not to work and the absolute absurdity of the way it was structured. But let's put that aside for now. You have a CARES Act that included a PPP, which included provisions in it which was designed, somewhat not perfectly, but designed to do what?
To keep people working, to provide goods and services to American people when their government was shutting them down.
So would you agree with me that that is more analogous to a takings under our constitutional jurisprudence and history than it is some sort of policy choice about what you're doing with respect to loan forgiveness or tax policy, right?
Exactly.
You have the power of the federal government, the power of state government, the power of local government, shutting down people's livelihoods, entirely shutting them down.
Correct.
So you're a restaurant in Richmond, Virginia, Austin, Texas, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, shut down because Anthony Fauci waved his magic wand and said, must shut down, must wear masks, must do all this stuff because I'm boy genius. Right. And all these people out there working who built up a livelihood, had a business, built it up from scratch, passed it down to their kids, they lose their entire livelihood. The same as if you took a highway and bulldozed it.
Exactly.
Like a taking. So a PPP loan, it was a loan, right, that would be forgiven if certain criteria were met. And what were those criteria to the best of the chairwoman's recollection?
Well, that they kept everybody employed and they stayed open and they did the things that were out there in the loan. Now, in the student loan issue, we are giving to the people who took out this $1 trillion in loans, and we're transferring the debt to somebody else. The people who owe this money willingly took it out to make more money by going to college. Not the same as what the federal government did, as you said, in shutting people down. It was a taking of their business.
So, question there. My wife was the daughter of a single mom, had very little resources. Her mom worked multiple jobs in order to get her through school and to get her to be able to go to the place of going to college. Because her mom didn't go to college, and she wanted that for her daughter as a single mom. And my wife performed very well in school and had the choice to go to schools such as Duke, which cost a lot of money, or some Ivy League options she had that cost a whole lot of money. She chose to go to Texas A&M University. Now, I think that was a good choice for a variety of other reasons that I won't get into at the moment. But she decided to go to Texas A&M, mostly because it was financially more viable and she would take on less debt. Now, my wife, nevertheless, took on about $50-something thousand of debt to get through her undergraduate education on top of having worked 2 jobs through school in order to pay her way through school. She then matriculated and then went to the University of Texas, where we met at law school. She took out student loans at the University of Texas. So at the time of our marriage, she had over $100,000 of loans. Now, she is at the tail end of still paying for those loans. After 20 years, our 20-year law school reunion was last month. So 20 years later, she has sacrificed, drove a 2000 Corolla with no options for years after years after years. Drove, a crappy car while watching all these other people riding around in their fancy car, making tough choices, tough choices about where to live, what to do with her kids, making sacrifices so her kids could go to the school that she thought was appropriate, literally sacrificing. I've sat there with her in tears, dealing with what we have to deal with in a family budget. And she did that. She worked hard. Her brother did that. Now, none of that's getting paid off because she already paid her loans off. I took out some loans. I had to pay my loans off. So my question is, for the 87% of Americans who don't have the student loans in question, for the person who paid off their loans like my wife, for the plumber in San Marcos, Texas, busting his rear end right now and started a business from scratch, didn't take out a loan, what do we tell him? What do we tell my wife? When the federal government comes in and writes a check for $500 billion to say, here's, in the words of my colleague on the other side of the aisle, just a little $10,000 for you, because we're going to write a check with money we don't have, with printed money. What do we tell the person who worked their whole life to pay off those loans? Chairwoman Fox.
Well, some people might say you're a sucker for having done it. That's what they'd say. But you're getting nothing. You're getting nothing. You played by the rules, you did it the right way, and you're getting nothing. Too bad.
Chairman Scott, what would you say to my wife who played by the rules?
I would say the same thing you would say to somebody that didn't pay off a PPP loan, $1 million. You got people, members of the House, got $1 million to help their businesses.
That is a deft deflection. Why don't you take that up with the members of the House who didn't pay the loans that you have an issue with? What would you say to my wife?
Say the same thing to the,
what do you say to my wife?
80% to the people who didn't, to the 99% that didn't get benefits.
What do you say to my wife who spent her whole life paying her loan off? Too bad? Too bad? You didn't get the $10,000 check?
Well, I'd say the same thing. It's not perfectly equitable. You're absolutely right.
Perfectly equitable. Okay. It's literally a check to 13% of Americans so that some people can pat themselves on the back in the false name of compassion while you're destroying the work ethic of the country. I mean, how is it remotely equitable to take money and to go pay off a loan?
You have no problem with equity with a tax benefit twice as big going to the top 1% in corporations. No problem with equity at all. No problem with the $1 million PPP
Wait, hold on. Make that statement again.
What do you say to
hold on. Make that statement again.
What did you say to the 99% of the people who didn't get PPP loans?
The people who got the PPP loans were people who applied for loans to keep businesses afloat, which was the legislation that my Democratic colleagues helped jam through as a part of the CARES Act in a panic over COVID. I wasn't the one that was chomping at the bit to jam the CARES Act
I didn't get a
through.
PPP loan. I didn't get $1 million PPP loan.
Right, but everybody in this freaking building voted to jam that through.
That's right.
Right. And so the PPP loans existed. Why? To try to keep businesses afloat that were getting shut down by the power of government.
And we had to help people. We had unemployment compensation.
Right,
unemployment
but we were
insurance.
trying to keep businesses afloat.
And
yes, it was abused. Shocker of all shocks.
Okay.
A government program of billions of dollars got abused by some people.
everybody's not going to benefit from this proposal. You're right.
But how is it that we can just choose, hey,
We didn't
here's a
choose.
check?
How do you choose on a PPP loan? Everybody didn't get a $1
because
million PPP loan.
Because you create a policy where you allow people to apply who have businesses who are shut down. That's how. Now, again, not a huge proponent of the entire CARES Act structure.
Right.
We tried to fix PPP
Well, you
on the
don't
back
have any
end.
problem with somebody getting a $1 million PPP loan and not paying it back?
No, I
It was
got a
loan.
huge problem with that. That's why I don't like government programs in the first place.
It was a
I hate
loan, and you
them.
got a problem with somebody trying to pay off their student debt.
And the chairman, the ranking member, sorry, is making a great case for why we shouldn't have all these programs in the first place that get abused by people
No, that
through
should
the
have been.
abuse of government power.
We wouldn't be in the situation if the programs had been as they had been originally planned.
Wait,
where
more
where
government
Pell-
subsidies
where
for
the
more
Pell
government
Grant
programs.
covered 80% of the benefit of going to a state college.
Does Chairwoman Fox you said
80%.
had something you wanted to add to that?
Now it's the third, and you expect people to be going to college. Now, there's some of us think going to college is a good thing and ought to be available to everybody.
Well, actually,
I know that's controversial around here.
I've got a thought on that in a second, but would the chairwoman have a thought on this question?
Well, yes, I do. I have two thoughts. Number one, PP loans were a part of legislation,
Right.
as you have pointed out.
Right.
This loan forgiveness has never been voted on by
course not.
Congress. This is illegal. The power of the purse belongs to Congress. It does not belong to the president. So that is, the other thing I would say is when there's an argument about Pell Grants, I read the Constitution, and nowhere in the Constitution do I read you're guaranteed a certain amount of money to go to college. In fact, the word education isn't in there at all. But what the Declaration of Independence tells us is we're guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Amen.
We're not to have it dumped in our lap.
To the gentlelady's point, I'm going to ask the gentlelady if she remembers this quote. People think the President of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone. He can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress, end quote. Do you remember who said that?
Nancy Pelosi.
Speaker Pelosi. Do you know what else she said? Quote, suppose your child just decided they, at this time, do not want to go to college, but you're paying taxes to forgive somebody else's obligations. She continued, you may not be happy about that, end quote. Wow. Speaker Pelosi, all of a sudden, a extreme MAGA Republican. How about Representative Pappas, who said, quote, but this announcement by President Biden is no way to make policy and sidesteps Congress and our oversight and fiscal responsibilities. He continued, quote, any plan to address student debt should go through the legislative process, end quote. Another extreme MAGA Republican, or is that a Democrat, Representative Pappas?
That's a Democrat.
And Representative Golden from Maine, quote, this decision by the president is out of touch with what the majority of the American people want from the White House, which is leadership to address the immediate challenges the country is facing. The president should be taking action to reduce inflationary pressures. With this move, he potentially makes them worse. It is out of step with the needs and values of working class Americans, end quote. Again, extreme MAGA Republican, Representative Golden from Maine. Does that sound right? Do you remember these quotes,
Yes, sir.
Chairwoman? One other point here is this question about that everyone should be able to get a college education if they want to. Well, first of all, does the gentlelady agree that you may join ROTC or join the military? I understand they're having some recruiting problems for reasons we could talk about in another hearing, about another topic, about the decisions being made by the brass at the Pentagon. But you could join the military or ROTC and get part or all of your college paid for. Would it surprise the gentlelady that according to a poll conducted by Mission Roll Call, 6,202 veterans, 76% said they disapprove of the push to forgive student loan debt for those who haven't served in the military?
Would
Would
the
that
gentleman-
surprise the gentlelady?
Gentlemen, yield
Surprise.
quickly. This is
gotta
a
vote.
time management question.
Yes.
I'm not trying to cut anybody off, but if we're going to finish our last two questioners so you can be dismissed. Otherwise, we'll have to bring the witnesses back.
I will wind up in 2 minutes.
All right,
Well, can we go vote?
we're going to have to recess anyway?
Got to recess now then.
Oh, well, then we're going to have to recess now, and then we come back and we can
Okay.
resume.
All right.
I would, committee stands in recess. I'd remind our witnesses, if you could, there's 3 votes. You cast your third vote. If you come back, we'll start as soon as you get back here. Same advice, obviously, the members of the committee. With that, we're in recess. Consideration of H.R. 467, S.J. Res 11, and H.J. Res 45. When we recessed, Mr. Roy was questioning, so the gentleman from Texas is recognized to resume his questions.
I think, Chairman, I know we're on time here, and I said I'd be a couple more minutes. I'll leave it at that. I wanted to just close with what I was saying to the chairwoman about the quotes from the military guys who've been interviewed and said, well, why are we doing this? When I went and sacrificed and did all that I was going to do to put my life on the line for this country and get those benefits. Here's a quote from one Marine Corps veteran in an op-ed from Fox, Cole Lyle, quote, I joined the Marine Corps 2 weeks out of high school, deployed to Afghanistan, earned my degree using the GI Bill. I know firsthand the sacrifice service members made to earn that benefit. They all made a choice. In most cases, joining the military meant receiving the GI Bill and the chance to go to school for little to no cost. They earned that opportunity. I assume the chairwoman agrees, and I'll leave it at this, agrees that, that is another reason why this is a massive problem, in addition to the final point that were we to actually be successful with this CRA and the president signed it into law, or were we to pass the debt ceiling bill that we've already passed and signed into law, ending this program, that we would save immediately almost $500 billion in 2023 deficit spending. Is that right?
That is correct, and what's going to happen again is if we are not able to stop these programs, the increase in the debt and inflation are going to continue to go up. This is a very inflationary measure in addition to adding to the debt, which we know adds to inflation.
Well, I think the gentlelady, I just want to state again, we would immediately save almost $500 billion in 2023 deficit if we were to pass this CRA and or if we were to pass the debt ceiling bill that Republicans responsibly passed a few weeks ago and the president has ignored. I yield back.
And if I could
Go
make
ahead. I'd
one
love
more
to.
comment. I appreciate your bringing up the GI Bill, that anybody who joins the military can get a free education. But you know, this business of education being unattainable in this country is a straw dog, because most anybody in this country right now can get an education without going into debt. Many are like your wife. They face that decision whether to go to a very expensive school or one that's affordable.
More affordable, right.
Or right now, most states are offering the opportunity to get a free AA degree, AAS degree while still in high school, and many students are doing that, and then others can work their way through college. But access is not an issue in this country. Who pays for the college education can be an issue, but a person can get through college without any debt whatsoever.
I also appreciate that from the gentlelady and would also posit that anybody graduating in high school right now, you're going to do a lot better off if you go get your welding certificate or your plumbing certificate, start a business, and don't go to school and go get a degree in gender studies. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Indiana is recognized for any